All right, good evening, everybody. As you join in, we'll wait just a couple of seconds as sometimes it takes a little bit as people are starting to pile on into the program this evening. So welcome. Appreciate you guys for joining us. And we'll get started here in the next few moments. All right, and just a quick reminder, this is recorded and will be available on our ALC platform through the university, and so you will have access to it, and anyone who may not have been able to join will have access to it. So welcome, good evening. Thank you guys for joining us this evening. My name is Justin Brown. I am the Associate Director in our Office for Alumni and Parent Engagement here at Furman University. Really excited about our program tonight and our group of panelists that are here with us to share with you guys. So just first off, want to give just a quick reminder. I know it's a little bit out, but it'll come up on us fast. I don't know if you guys are like me. I'm like, July is already here and it seems like we were just in April. But in October, our homecoming will be October 18th and 19th. So go ahead and get that on your calendar if you don't have it, and just want to share the reminder. We do, if you are not familiar, we do every homecoming Saturday morning host an Out at Furman brunch at McAllister Auditorium, and so would love for you guys to join us along with some other events we'll have throughout the semester here, and we'll probably do another webinar as well as we did last year. So again, thank you guys for coming out. I won't take up much of your time. I just want to say thank you. Again, we are here for Colors of the Rainbow, Voices from Furman University LGBTQIA plus community. This was edited by Furman's own Scott Henderson and consisted of 16 contributors. And so all of these are just stories that are shared through poetry, visual artworks, works of fiction, essays, and the likes. And so we have some of those contributors as well with us to share some of their work with you. And so without any further ado, I am going to throw it to Scott and let him take it from here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Justin, very much. And a big thanks to Furman's Alumni Association, and also a big thanks to all of the members of the audience this evening. What I thought I would do is just take 4 or 5 minutes and talk about the genesis of this volume called Colors of the Rainbow. And after I do that, I am delighted to be able to give 5 of the contributors who are with us this evening an opportunity to talk about their contributions to the volume. This particular project came about in May of 2022, and there were a couple of reasons that I thought that this might be a worthwhile undertaking. One was the fact that there was, and I suppose continues to be, all sorts of misinformation on the internet. I know that's a shock to everyone, but misinformation about the type of environment Furman is for LGBTQIA plus faculty, staff, students. And that misinformation was largely negative. I recall reading some forum where an individual had posted the question, I'm thinking about enrolling in Furman in the fall. I identify as queer. Should I go? And one of the responses was, "Oh no, I mean, I've never been there, but it's a Baptist school and they'll certainly persecute you." Well, Furman was not a Baptist school. It had been 30 years since it had had any affiliation with the South Carolina Baptist Convention. At any rate, I was concerned about that misinformation. I was also concerned that some of that misinformation was reaching parents who were then reaching out to me and others at Furman saying, gee, my child came out this past year as a senior in high school, and they really would love to come to Furman, but we're worried about what will happen to them if they're open at Furman. And then finally, as most of us know, we are living through a period in which there has been an uptick in negative comments and even physical harassment and attacks on LGBTQ folks. So what I thought was a good idea at the time, and I still think it was a good idea, was that I would reach out to faculty, staff, students, and alums who identified as LGBTQ, and I would ask them to contribute creative pieces to a volume, which is the volume we're talking about tonight, the book, Colors of the Rainbow. And I told them they could come up with any kind of piece they wanted to. It could be fiction, it could be nonfiction, poetry, prose, cultural analysis. We even, and I love this, we even have photographs of both paintings and sculptings that were done by contributors. As Justin said, we had 16 contributors, but there are 23 pieces in the volume. The only string that I attached to the submissions was I asked the contributors to present an affirming vision of their identification as LGBTQIA plus. That did not mean that they couldn't talk about struggles that they had gone through or were continuing to go through, but I wanted this volume to speak to the fact that there were individuals at Furman, there had been individuals at Furman, and there would continue to be individuals at Furman who affirmed and embraced and celebrated an LGBTQIA identity. Final thing I'll say is that the volume was published last May, so that was May of 2023. It is typically available in the bookstore, although as of this moment, they don't have any copies, but it is available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. It is a paperback, which I think came out extremely well. I want to thank Valerie Sharp for the design, especially the cover, but also the interior, as well as Jill Hendricks of FPS Publishing. The final question folks often have is, well, you know, what's happening with the royalties? Well, the book is selling on Amazon for $15.18 because only on Amazon would you get some weird unrounded amount like that. And I will tell you that only about 70 cents out of that comes as royalties, and all of the royalties are being donated back to the Furman LGBTQ student group. So I want to applaud all of the contributors for agreeing not to fight over those enormous royalties. I hope, as I now turn it over to our first contributor, that if you have a chance to purchase a copy or read a copy, you will see, like I did, that just extraordinarily heartfelt, creative pieces that are inspiring and heartwarming. So let me turn it over to Ben Haywood, who will introduce himself and talk about his piece in the volume.
Thank you, Scott, and thanks everyone for being here. Thanks, Justin, for inviting me and the Alumni Affairs group for hosting this. And a special thanks to Scott for originating this project. He put so much effort and work into this. So I'm Ben Haywood. I am the Associate Director of the Faculty Development Center here at Furman, and I'm an environmental scientist by training. So when Scott kind of contacted us and said, hey, you know, I've got this project, really interested in kind of creative aspects and writing, I was a little bit intimidated by that. I'm not really accustomed to writing creatively. And even I think I replied to Scott saying, look, I love the project. I love the idea. I'd love to support it, but I've got nothing, right? I don't really, that's not in my wheelhouse. But after some back and forth and a good bit of patience and patient encouragement on Scott's part, I eventually drafted my submission, which is called A Queer Person's Field Guide to an Aviary. So for a bit of backstory, for many years now, I've been drawn to the tradition of animal medicine, not of the veterinary nature, but animal medicine has really existed for quite some time in indigenous cultures as a part of their understanding of interconnection and interrelationship with the living world around us. At the core of these traditions is a belief that non-human animals are able to offer spiritual and symbolic guidance because they possess specific qualities, oftentimes referred to as their medicine, that can be passed on to humans when it's needed. So for instance, a bear might bring medicine around strength and introspection because of their ability to kind of go into these long sleeps, or an owl might bring medicine around wisdom or intuition because of their keen observation skills. So as a lifelong birder, for those of you that aren't birders, that's a person that likes to watch and learn about birds. I'm particularly drawn towards medicine that symbolizes birds and with symbolism of birds in it. So it's probably no surprise to you that when we humans face challenges, we tend to kind of go towards those things that bring us meaning. So naturally, I have found a lot of comfort among my avian friends over the many years that I've journeyed to come to terms with my own identity as a gay man, how that would be received and understood by those that I love, and the unique gifts that my sexuality allows me to share with the world. So A Queer Person's Field Guide to an Aviary draws from that animal medicine tradition, and it pays homage to one of my favorite places as a childhood, which was the aviary at my local zoo, the North Carolina Zoo. Feeling like a bit out of place in my rural North Carolina community where I grew up, I always felt like, and pardon the pun, I was one of the flock in that aviary. I felt at home, even when it seemed like I was pretty alone in the outside world. The birds in that space taught me a lot about accepting and celebrating who I was, like the great crested mynas, the Bali mynas, which I write about in the book. And so these birds are known as mimics. They tend to mimic the calls of other birds, just like our mockingbirds in this area. And so I wrote just a little bit about it, and I'll read just a paragraph here for you tonight. Frankly, I've always wondered why these birds are so adept at mimicking other elements of their surroundings. Both stunning birds on their own, their skills at imitation seem unnecessary. They have little reason to be anything other than exactly what they are: gorgeous, highly intelligent, uniquely fashioned, ecologically important, and just plain fun. If you watch these birds for long, you'll see the characteristic jubilant bubble that they exude, a joy that should be celebrated, not covered up with the replicated sounds and voices of others. As a queer person, however you might define that aspect of your identity, every element of your one-of-a-kind being should also be celebrated. It's tempting to mimic the behaviors, opinions, and appearances of those in the majority. In fact, many of us are rather good at doing so, a strategy we learned early on as a way to hide our true selves. But your diversity adds vibrancy and purpose to the dense forest of humanity. Conformity is boring. You are an essential component of the rich tapestry of life, every single part of you. And so, in the end, for me, my interactions with birds over the years really inspired this piece, and they've reminded me that every single creature, whether that's human or non-human alike, is distinctly unique, representing a variety of shapes and sizes, and to borrow a bird term, plumages, and that it's that variety that brings us strength and makes this small kind of floating planet in the Milky Way much more beautiful too. And so as I reflect on the LGBTQ community at Furman, I see that same kind of rich diversity, and I'm really proud to be a member of our small but mighty flock too. So thanks for having me tonight. I will turn it over to Liv next.
Hello, I'm Liv Fletcher. I'm a senior here at Furman University, and I'm also the incoming president for the Furman Pride Alliance, which is the student organization on campus that helps with the queer community. I'm very grateful to be a part of this project. I wouldn't say I'm a very lucky person, but I definitely got lucky when I got Dr. Henderson as my academic advisor. So I was super excited that he asked me to be a part of this. So I guess like a big inspiration for me is there's a sort of isolation that comes with being queer. And it eventually led me to want to share my writing with others in hopes that maybe others wouldn't feel as isolated. So my piece is how it sounds, words spelled out on a piece of paper. I've always loved to write, but was never great at following the preferred structures of writing that were already in place, which can be considered ironic as the types of themes I usually write about also do not follow the norms of things, like being queer. But instead of focusing on what logistically sounds good, I find it easier just to let go of all the bottled up emotions that have been living in my head and go from there. So for context of my piece, I first publicly came out fall of 2019, and I'm sure as you're aware, a couple months later, the pandemic hit. So I never really got to be publicly queer until I came to Furman. And this isolation of being queer in general, along with the physical isolation of being in quarantine, left me with a lot of, I would say, complex emotions and feelings that may have manifested differently if I had the support system I have now at Furman. So as I said, I'm the incoming president for the Furman Pride Alliance, which has been my main support system here on campus. And since I publicly came out only a couple months before quarantine, these meetings and events that this organization hosted were the first places I was able to be in an affirming space. So it'll always have a special place in my heart. And it just helped me realize that the things I feel, I'm not the only one, and I don't need to figure it all out on my own, which is just a beautiful part of our community. But now as a senior, I can say with confidence that these once complex feelings aren't so scary to me anymore. I remember when I think I said in like my first or second draft to Dr. Henderson, he asked if I preferred the writing to be uncapitalized. And I didn't realize this at first was like a choice that I made. My phone is just set up that way, and I usually write on my notes app. But as I thought about it, I decided I wanted to keep it like that because I think it shows my youth. I would say that my age group gets criticized for our naiveness. But as I grow older, I want to be able to look back on what I was feeling when I was 18 or 16 or 14. I think it's important to remember where you started, and to know that you've made it through once before you can make it through once again. And I would say the community I found at Furman has really allowed me to become a more authentic version of myself, and contributed to this project was really the start of it. I'm just so grateful that I got the opportunity to share the disarray of feelings I have learned to navigate as a queer person, in hopes that others will not feel so isolated as I once did. Because at the end of the day, we are still people struggling with topics such as grief and mistreatment, and we deserve to tell those stories just as much as the next person. I can read, just so that you have context, I can read what I wrote. Some days I love being queer. I love seeing the world through a different lens. I love the feeling of connecting with another queer person, when we can share our stories, whether they are filled with love or rage, in complete safety. I love the feeling of acceptance when I finally get the courage to open up. I love the excitement of realizing that you both like each other more than just friends. But then there are days when I don't love being queer, when seeing the world differently feels isolating instead of electrifying. When the stories you have to share are more traumatic than they are hopeful. When your biggest fear was that they wouldn't show up to your wedding, so you felt a sense of relief when they passed. When your story isn't taken seriously because only men are capable of such evil. I hope that one day our perspectives will be seen as a gift, that the stories we will tell will be more light than they are dark. that coming out won't be a prerequisite to telling people who you like, that when our relationships are seen as sexual, it's not solely through the eyes of men. And when they do take our relationship seriously, they're seen not only as sunshine and rainbows. So it's just a collection of thoughts and feelings and experiences I've had as a queer person. And I'm glad I was able to share it with you all. And thank you for being here. I'll pass it over. I think Nick is next.
Hello, I'm Nick Radel. I teach English at Furman. I'm a professor of English at Furman, and I've been at Furman a very long time and been associated with Furman, the Furman Gay Group. I helped to found that gay group in the 1990s, and I've been a teacher, a pretty consistent teacher of sexuality, gender, feminist studies at Furman, but only most recently with the appearance of Dr. Casey and the sort of revamped women's gender and sexuality studies. I've been a sort of designated teacher of queer theory and sexuality studies, and I've created several new courses at Furman in literature and other sorts of queer thinking. So queer stories, I call one of them, and so that will help explain, I think, what it is that I've done in Scott's book, which I actually love very much. I think it's a terrific book. And I've been fascinated reading my colleagues' work and my students and former students' work. And I decided that I was just going to read a selection for you tonight and make some confessions about it. I wrote my pieces partly because I'm just getting to be an old man, and I thought I wanted to write some things down about my life as it was. And so I wrote two pieces, and Scott generously allowed me to publish both of them. The first one I called Gay 101. It was a coming out piece. And that's what I want to read from tonight. But let me just say, the second one was what turned into an AIDS story. I really wrote it as a tribute to an early boyfriend, lover, I suppose, if you will. And he later died of AIDS. And so, that came into play in the story. But the piece I enjoy most myself is the coming out story. And the reason I wrote it and the reason I like it is because I wanted it to be a different kind of coming out story than the usual coming out story. In the first place, I wanted to write a story that didn't traumatize or didn't imagine that coming out was a traumatic experience for all gay people. Frankly and truthfully, it wasn't a traumatic experience for me, and my life as a young gay person wasn't a traumatic experience. So I thought that was a story that needed to be told, because too often I think we tell the story of how awful and miserable it is as a gay youth, being a gay youth, when in fact that's not always people's experience. And even when it is partly your experience, it's not the entirety of your experience, as Liv's poem makes clear to us. So that was one thing I wanted to address in this piece. And the other thing I want to address in this piece is the lingering image of the predatory homosexual. And I just, I find that difficult. I'm not sort of saying there aren't predatory homosexuals, there no doubt are, but I find that a lingering stereotype that's troubling. So let me just read a brief, I hope, story from the book that deals with both of these things. I begin. A defining moment of my gay youth came when I met a jolly band of resisting drag queens and gay men in Cincinnati. Lauren, Christy, Bobby, and Jake were a small part of Cincinnati's homegrown gay liberation front. All four helped ease me out of the closet. In Cincinnati, in those days, we called it bringing someone out, as if it was a formal educational service for the young and benighted, and of course it was. Lauren DeMichaels ushered me out into the queer arena, not because I found her especially attractive in or out of drag. I had decided that at 17, it was time to stop making such a big deal of coming out. So I vowed I'd do it with the next person who asked. And Tommy, that is Lauren out of drag, asked. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon at a gay picnic organized by the fledgling University of Cincinnati gay group. Tommy invited me with one eyebrow raised for a walk through Mount Storm Park. Conveniently, we discovered a wall of bushes bent over an enclosed space, a natural bower of bliss into which my gay acrasia tempted me. With his tight cutoffs, tan legs, and slim hips, Tommy was right enough for the moment. But when a week later I ended up alone in his apartment after my best friend abandoned me, I found myself where I really didn't want to be, in his arms again, this time on a bed. Today, some might see Tommy as predatory. The homosexualist vampire-like seducer still turns up in gay popular works. He takes advantage of our young hero, revealing his depraved and threatening homosexual self over and against the hero's more noble one. But Tommy was, as we all always are, feeling his way into his then present queerness. He said earnestly he was doing me a favor, teaching me to give as well as receive. I'm laughing at his utter seriousness as I write this. If the lesson was too advanced for my skill level, it wasn't entirely Tommy's fault. He was an unimaginative romantic who thought of me as a catch worth reeling in. But he was also, after all, the means to my end. I was getting the coming out thing out of the way, and I got Tommy out of the way shortly thereafter. Christy made a play, and because she was a charming hostess, I felt I shouldn't say no. And then Bobby did too. But having been acquainted already with Lauren's and Christie's prickly, fresh-shaved, naked chests, I declined politely. So when sweet, hairy-chested Jake, an older man of 21, intimated that I might share his bed, I took him up on the offer. As 17-year-olds do, I developed a little crush on him. He was so kind, so unassuming, and when I decided I could make my own way in the world, he helped ease that transition too. That's just a small part of the story, but I really wanted to write a positive story and a story about the people who helped me come out and helped me as a young gay person understand what that meant. And also, I think maybe to pay tribute to the idea that indeed gay people have to teach each other what it means to be gay, how to be gay, how to meet gay people and know what's going on in their gay communities. So that was what I attempted to do in this story called Gay 101. I should add too quickly that this story was published during the pandemic before Scott agreed to reprint it. It was published in a little online blog called The Exquisite Pandemic, a literary blog out of New York that put me in the presence of some pretty good writers. Not that I imagine my own writing is anywhere near as good as theirs, but I was happy to be in it. So from there, I think I'm turning this over to Kelsey.
Thank you, Nick. And I find myself unusually among a great group of writers, not where I often find myself, but happy to be here tonight to celebrate Pride with all of you and to celebrate colors of the rainbow a little bit. When Scott asked me to contribute to this, it didn't take me long to think about. I knew my answer immediately, and my answer was absolutely not. No way. A little like Ben, I felt very intimidated because creative writing is not my gig. I am an economist. I'm a professor of economics at Furman. And so I felt intimidated by this, as Ben did, but I thought about it more. I wanted to contribute. I wanted to support the project. And so finally, I wrote back to Scott and I said, okay, as long as you promise that you will let me know if it's no good and you'll just reject it outright. And then I got to writing, I got to the process. I wanted to write something. I wanted to lean on my expertise as an economist. That's where I feel confident. That's where I feel secure. I was going to write about taxes, right? Everyone wants to learn about taxes. That didn't work out. Though I did get taxes into my piece a little bit. So what I did is I decided I just went right back to what is right at the intersection of me, my queer identity, and my experience at Furman. And when I really focused on that, I had one clear event come to my mind, which is the event that I wrote about for my contribution. So I'll take a few minutes to read a bit of my piece called Furman's Pathways. It was my first year, my first semester as a professor at Furman University. I was walking between Riley Hall and the Trone Center alongside the library, a pathway I have become quite familiar with in the 5 years since, as it leads from my office toward the dining hall for lunch. The walkway is cobbled in brick and has a gentle curve to it. As someone who prefers to walk quickly and arrive places on time, I've noticed that this is not designed for efficient travel. It's designed for something else, maybe for aesthetic, or maybe for slower walks with pleasant conversation. Ugh, I was worried these sweatpants made me look dykey. Oh no, you look fine. This was the pleasant conversation that reached my ears on that path during my first fall at Furman. A concern shared between two female presenting students who I guess were first years based on their matching Furman tees. I didn't stop them or say anything. I was shocked and silent, my mind spinning with possibilities. I wanted to ask whether I looked dykey in my slacks or introduce myself as a dyke in order to shock and silence them. I wanted to mind my own business because I had somewhere to be and they have the right to freedom of thought and expression. I wanted to have a productive exchange, but I didn't know how to start it. They continued walking past me and I continued walking past them. But I have felt stuck to that moment and place long since. I kept walking that pathway lunch after lunch. I settled into work and life at Furman, unpacking my books and sharing dinners with welcoming and supportive colleagues. One of these evenings, I recounted my experience on the path, and a colleague assured me not to worry, that I would soon have the confidence to intervene as I got used to my place in the Furman community. I understood the point, but even halfway into my second gin, I knew it was much more complicated than that. That's sort of the first half of my piece or so. I go on to sort of describe my own winding thought process. As I circle around and around on things, I talk about power dynamics, internalized misogyny. I think about passing privileges and minority taxes. And I just keep processing, truly processing, kind of as Liv described, using this writing as a way to process some of these emotions, to process some of these thoughts that I've had. And I like to analyze things from lots of different dimensions. And I find myself, if I'm on the phone, I literally pace in circles. And so if you read my piece, Furman's Pathways, I think you'll feel a little bit of that circular feeling. Are we going anywhere? Have we returned to the beginning? Do we have a bigger takeaway? And one of the takeaways that I did have was thinking about this tug of war between what can I do in my local community as compared to what can I do for a more global community. And while I said that to begin with, I felt very uncomfortable writing something in this format because it's not really my expertise. Scott, you may have created a small monster because since Colors of the Rainbow, I have now also written something a little bit closer to my lane for an international magazine called Shud Hashar. And I wrote a piece about queer labor now, and I'm looking at the plight of queer folks all around the globe and highlighting some of the challenges there and some of the possible moves forward. So I really enjoyed taking this, what for me was a very uncomfortable step in trying to write this piece and just feel lucky to have such good neighbors, both in the book and here in Zoom. And I'll introduce you to one of those neighbors. Elizabeth will tell us a little bit about her piece.
Thanks, Kelsey. I don't know if I've ever been introduced before. It feels very fancy. I'm Elizabeth Allen, and so I graduated from Furman with my undergrad in elementary education in 2020, and then I went back. They didn't have enough of my money yet, and got my master's in 2022 in literacy. So now I'm sort of removed from the Furman element, but I teach not 10 minutes away from Furman in a Greenville County Schools elementary school. So I see the Furman sign every day, but I'm not quite on campus yet. And I remembered that this webinar was coming up, and so I reread my piece to prepare, and it was like stepping into a time capsule. So I wrote this only a year ago, but my life has changed drastically since then, so I'll tell you about it. So my piece is mostly about my coming out story, but specifically within the Lutheran Church. So my mother is a Lutheran pastor in Greenville, South Carolina, and so my whole life has been a lot of going to church, talking about church, being with people who go to church, and being around people who think the same way that my parents did. And so when I turned up gay, didn't quite know what to do with all of that. So my mother dealt with a lot of it while I ran away to Furman and got to be myself there, while she picked up a lot of the pieces. And so now Trinity Lutheran is this huge, welcoming, wonderful place. And so that's why I originally wrote this piece. Sorry, Dr. Henderson, that it was not for you to begin with, but so that's why I originally wrote it, was to present at a queer-led worship at Trinity, which is all about my experience and how, even though it was really traumatic and people said some really ugly things, that we've really grown from that and turned into a better place. That's more welcoming and inclusive. They hosted the Pride service for Greenville last night. So they've done some amazing things, but it was also, I feel kind of like a bad gay. I don't know if y'all ever feel that way or not. If not, it's just me and I'll tell you about it. That I just don't, being gay isn't so much a part of my personality as it was when I was at Furman. When I was at Furman, I wanted everybody to know I'm a lesbian. I don't care what you think about it. I'm going to make you just absolutely love me because I'm charming. And that was exhausting. And it was just hard to keep up with. And there was a lot of rejection. And so now that I've been, I guess you could call it the adult world, it's been a lot more of, no, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, you're missing out on a charming personality with a lot of third grade specific stories. But it's been a lot less rainbows and sunshine and gay pride. It's been a lot less of that, and a lot more of, no, this is just me and this is just a piece of me. So reading this piece back, I was like, wow, I have definitely changed a lot and matured a lot. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean that being gay isn't still a huge piece of me. I'm sitting in the house my partner and I bought, and our cats are bugging me for when they're going to get fed, but it's less of a battle now, and it's more of like a coming home. Like, okay, this is who I'm supposed to be. This is where I'm supposed to be. It's not like I have to fight with the doctor at the doctor's office. Like, no, I'm sitting here because I'm waiting on my partner to be done. Like, it's less of an argument now. So it was cathartic to write this in the moment when life felt so much like a battle, and it was cathartic to read it again where it just feels calm. So I am honored to have been included in this piece. If you can talk to any of my professors at Furman, I'm not a great writer, and I'm really not a great speaker either. But it was very humbling to be asked to be a part of this process, especially with such honestly just smart people who are on this panel with me. So I'm honored to have been included, and to even have been considered. And so with that, I'll pass it back to Dr. Henderson. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Scott, I was going to open it up for Q&A. You ready for that? Okay,
Yeah.
good. Good.
I think we can ask the rest of the panel to go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, so thank first offhand to all of our panelists for taking time out and sharing your stories in the book, but also just joining us this evening as well. Probably more so sharing your stories in the book. This is probably a smaller piece that is a little bit less significant, but thank you for sharing those stories. And I know so many people, here in attendance this evening, and just people at large at Furman, Furman alumni specifically, can resonate with some of those stories. So we're going to open it up for Q&A. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box. I'll open up. Everyone had the opportunity to ask questions prior to when they registered. And so we did have a couple questions come in. I think one that's very pertinent that may be helpful is a question of what resources are available for Furman. And I think Liv kind of talked about the Furman Pride Alliance, so I think that's one. But what resources are available at Furman for queer identifying students, and then also a second part to that question was what can alumni specifically do to support? And so I'll start by answering the second part first, and just say I think Furman is taking strides. I'm a 2009 graduate, and so to see where Furman is now in this space is very encouraging. I think it's definitely taking those steps in the right place. I've been here for 2 years and have been extremely proud of just seeing things mature in a lot of different ways. And so one of the things that we're currently working on as a university, I think this is really led out by Dr. Kathleen Casey, who is the director of the Women's Genders and Sexuality Studies Department. We're forming an LGBTQIA plus alumni association. And so she is spearheading that. We are coming alongside her to support her in our alumni office. And so if anybody who's as an alum on this call is interested in kind of supporting in that way, maybe becoming a part of just talking to Dr. Casey about more information in that, please feel free to reach out to her. I know, again, she's at the genesis of it and putting together kind of an initial group. And so I know there'll be some things. Again, there's always the Out at Furman brunch that I mentioned at the very beginning. That's a great way to connect. We do invite current students to come be a part of that. And so it's great to connect and kind of maybe even mentoring roles and just even sharing stories and helping people get through. We hosted a webinar in last fall on National Coming Out Day. And so we're doing those different things from our office standpoint as far as alumni getting involved. And so again, if you're interested in potentially being a part of that alumni association, Dr. Casey would be a great person to reach out to get more information. Or you can also reach out to anyone in our office and we can get you over to her. But the first part of that question, as far as the resources available currently for students, I'll throw that to the panel to kind of jump in where they feel.
As you noted, Justin, and we're fortunate to have Liv with us here this evening. We have a vibrant student organization which is open to a range of students, not just the LGBTQIA community, but has a record number of individuals who participate in it at this point in Furman's history. So there's a very interesting line that can be drawn from Nick Radle's experiences to those of Liv's over the course of, well, over 30 years. We do have an LGBTQ plus affairs committee that is focused more on staff and faculty, but also oversees issues of concern to students. We have a student member on the committee. And the other thing I'll mention, and then let my colleagues note any other resources, is that Furman now has an office called the Center for Inclusive Communities that's headed up by Dr. Franklin Ellis. And his office has been extraordinarily attentive and supportive of LGBTQIA plus students and their concerns. So Furman definitely has a wide array now of resources for students who identify in various ways. I'm not sure I've included everything. If any of my colleagues wants to add something.
I would just say a couple of additional resources. The Trone Center for Mental Fitness has really been a big advocate for providing special support and support groups for LGBTQ identifying individuals. That's been ongoing for the past several semesters. Also, there is an emergency fund, the Chuck Evans Emergency Fund, that is available to students that may need assistance because, for example, they can't go home over break because of their identity. And so there's some support resources available through that. as well. So those two resources are really helpful for our students.
I would personally ask the question to faculty members. Do you guys feel like you have the resources and support as you serve and work at Furman University?
I actually was going to say before you asked the question, and I think this is relevant to it, there has to me been a major change at Furman in the past 10 years, maybe longer than that, but certainly in the past 10 years, that we went from, I remember at Furman's 175th anniversary, I wrote a presentation for the faculty retreat called The Sexless Space. And it really documented the ways in which, all of the publicity around Furman's campus, the sort of PR images, the photo books, Furman reports, whatever the Furman magazine, that's what I'm thinking of. You looked in them in vain for any evidence that there was sex at Furman's campus. And I'm like, this is an environment with teenagers, but there was nothing. And so I don't want to pretend, I don't want to suggest that Furman has now, become a sort of, a hotbed of sexual representation. It has not. But the curriculum has changed amazingly. The curriculum is loaded with courses that address queer issues, issues of sexuality, gender issues, sometimes, marginally or peripherally, and sometimes, in terms of the center. But I think that has been a tremendous difference that's occurred at Furman. And I think that has supported a more and more open student population, a more and more open population of staff and faculty members. And it just has made a world of difference in the place that Furman is for gay people. I have to say, I sometimes feel as I get closer and closer to retirement that, that the last 5 years have been in some ways the happiest I've spent at Furman. And it's in large part because I'm teaching now things I wanted to teach in sexuality studies, and those things are welcomed, not resisted. So I think it's a radically different place in many ways.
And if I can just jump in quickly, to answer your question about faculty, Justin, I think what the Alumni Association is doing. I mean, you're not directly connected to faculty, but this is an enormous affirmation, just this webinar. So again, thank you for this opportunity. And secondly, I want to give a shout out to our president, Dr. Elizabeth Davis. When the book came out, I dropped a copy off at her office with a short note. I said, Elizabeth, you at some point might want to just sort of flip through this, but it has to do with Furman. So I thought, you should get a copy. The next morning, she emailed me. She had read the entire book and she talked about specific selections. So I knew immediately that it was not just puffery on her part. And she was absolutely delighted with it and has been totally supportive of that undertaking and others as well. So a big shout out to her.
And I'll put maybe Liv and or Elizabeth on the spot here. Just as a current student, and Elizabeth as kind of a recent grad, even now as an alum, what are some ways do you feel as students in kind of the student sphere that you feel like alumni could support you all better as queer identifying students at Furman?
I guess I'll go first. I'm not really sure. I think just it's nice having physical support, of course, like the Out at Furman brunch. I've gone for the past, I guess, 3 years now. And it's just been awesome to meet different people and to learn about their own experiences. And I just think connections is really great, especially in the local area, and it's helpful for current students to learn what Furman may have been like, and the little pockets that they can go to, and And just like any advice, really, I think is helpful. It's helpful to have mentorship for sure.
And just to have projects such as this one, like Colors of the Rainbow, just got me right back into the Furman zone. I was like, oh, just such defining moments and just such a big piece of my life. I was like, oh, I get to go back in my head for a little bit. So just having this to work on has been wonderful. And if it helps even just one person feel less alone, then my vague editing wasn't for naught. So that makes me happy. And also just seeing people in the LGBTQ plus community in such big things like the Furman magazine, Dr. Henderson, like is a huge way to be like, oh my gosh, okay, so there's people like me who are still being celebrated and seen and supported. It's a lot of that, the outwardness of what we get to see of each other. So it's, I don't really know what else could be done. It feels pretty good. 10 out of 10 from me.
Good, thank you.
Justin, I don't know if are there any other questions queued up at the moment? Because otherwise,
No other questions. Nope.
Okay, I wanted to dovetail on what Elizabeth said, because it could be of interest to any alums who are on the Zoom call right now. Another huge shout out goes to our staff in special archives and collections in the Furman Library. They have assembled an incredible LGBTQ plus historic digital timeline that focuses on the history of LGBTQ plus individuals and milestones at Furman. I am not aware of anything quite like this, at least in our peer group of institutions. Nick is highlighted in it in a wonderful way, as are a number of our other colleagues. So I would encourage our alums not only to take a moment to look at that timeline, but they are constantly soliciting more material, which is to say that the memories and recollections of LGBTQ plus alums are important and valued. They need to be a part of our story. And I think people, like a couple of our contributors suggested this morning, I mean, you're too quick to downplay your own abilities or your own contributions to a larger story. And so I would encourage alums or the alums who are on the call to encourage their friends that they might know to reach out to the library and to offer your own stories, again, as part of a larger narrative of how Furman has become what it is today. So I appreciate having that opportunity to give them that recognition that they richly deserve.
Yeah, we had one question come in that basically asks, what is it like being queer in the greater Greenville community here? And for those who've been in the area for a while, how would you say you've seen that evolve, and what are maybe some areas you would want to see improvement here?
I can only speak for, I've only been here 5 years, so I can't speak for the long-term trajectory, although I have colleagues who have been here quite some time and have shared some of that with me. But, you know, just like any community, there are welcoming spaces and there are not welcoming spaces. But I would say that there are many, many welcoming spaces in the greater Greenville community. And I have certainly found community beyond Furman, although Furman certainly has provided a good bit of community as well. And I would also say that there are more and more folks moving to the area where you know, that community is growing. It's actually growing pretty rapidly and pretty quickly in this region. So there's a lot of opportunity to connect with other queer individuals in the community, and I found it really refreshing, even though we are in the South, that there are so many welcoming spaces in this region.
And I've been in Greenville since I was born, and it has definitely made a lot of huge changes. Just to where, you know, I feel comfortable walking down the street now. If I'm wearing something with a rainbow on it, I'm like, okay, probably going to be fine today. There's the Queer Wellness Center in Greenville now that has huge resources for youth and for adults, and is a central meeting place for all kinds of events. Mostly, I think I just follow Upstate Pride on Instagram, and they tell me everything that's going on. If you were to go to every single one of those events, I think you would be exhausted. So there's all kinds of resources for every kind of person if you can put yourself out there a little bit and try something a little bit new, which was definitely not the case when I was even in high school, let alone now. So it's gotten much better. And I think Furman has a lot to do with that too.
Obviously I haven't been here for that long, but my mom actually went to Furman, and she was here when it was still affiliated with the church. And so it was like boys on one side, girls on the other. And just from the stories that she shared with me, I mean, when she was here, Traveler's Rest was really nothing. Downtown was really nothing. And this summer, I'm the summer intern for the Upstate South Carolina LGBT plus Chamber of Commerce. It's a mouthful. But I've got to like experience a lot more queer spaces in Greenville that I never knew existed, like the Queer Wellness Center and Upstate Pride. And I was also connected with those resources pretty early on, just with FBA and everything. But it's really growing. I mean, you know, I've only been here for 3 years, so I've been here when it's been bigger. But again, with my mom and everything, I've taken her to some of like the restaurants I've tried and everything, and she's just like, wow, this is nothing like it was when she was here. So it's definitely grown.
Thank you. And I do want to add, I put in the chat group, this is from Dr. Casey. If anybody's in the Greenville area this weekend, the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies program in Furman Pride will have a booth at the Black Pride for the first time. So this Saturday from 11 to 6. So if you are around, stop by and say hello and come out and have a good time. So, and also the timeline that Dr. Henderson mentioned, the link is also in the chat for you guys to take a look at. So it is 8:01, and so I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. Again, thank you to the panelists. One last thing before we get out of here. For those who are in attendance, while you guys were paying attention, I was over here making some little notes and stuff and making names and doing a drawing. All right. And so we want to give away one book for free to one of the attendees today. So just a small thank you. And the winner is Julia Collins. So Julia, congratulations. I will reach out in the next day or so to get your information, and we will send you a book from Dr. Henderson and the panelists. So again, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much. Just really appreciative of it. Hope you all have a great evening and go dance. Thank y'all.